Welcome to Kiffin's Keep, an intellectual resource for the pillar and buttress of the truth, which is the church. This is a project of the London Lyceum, which is all about serious thinking for a serious church. I am Jordan Stefaniak, president of the London Lyceum and host of Kiffin's Keep. And as always, I'm excited to be here with you all today. In today's episode, I plan to cover the topic of the civil magistrate. We're going to cover a couple of Baptist confessions and what that means for our political theology, or so, however you have it. Before we get started, remember, like the video if you enjoyed the content, drop a comment if you agree or disagree or have other further thoughts, and as always, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. If you have questions, you can check me out at the website, thelondonlyceum.com/kiffins-keep, and I'm happy to answer them there. Now, the topic of the civil magistrate has come once again to the fore, particularly for Baptists. So if you are online in any manner, there's always seems to be discussions about the civil magistrate and what it means to have a properly Protestant political government or political theory, whatever it is, making the case to go back, turn the clock back to an older, more historic, robust version of the civil government. And that has been ongoing for, it seems like, several years now. But recently there was more of a combustion of this as someone quoted the Baptist Faith and Message, and others did not take kindly to it, though they didn't realize it was the Baptist Faith and Message, I don't think. I think it's just evidence that these people had not read the Baptist Faith and Message because they're calling it not Baptist and not Christian. And so that's a serious claim to make of the Baptist Faith and Message, that it's not Baptist and it's not Christian. Maybe one can make the case that it's not being consistently Baptist, but to make the case that it's not Christian seems like quite the leap. Now, I plan to talk a little bit just in general about what do these Baptist confessions say about the civil magistrate, because if we want to understand what a Baptist vision of political theology is, well, where's the best place to go? The Baptist confessions. If you want to understand what a tradition thinks, you go to their confessional documents. Why? Because confessional documents are consensus documents upon which churches actually agree upon and say, this, yes, is what we believe and what we subscribe to. That's a very valuable tool to have rather than just an individual voice who might have some curious claims throughout their works. Having a consensus document state this is what it's for and what it is very, very helpful. And there do seem to be some differences between a 17th century and 18th century British context versus the 19th and 20th and 21st century American context. Yes, there are differences in my mind in their political theologies to some degree, not to a great degree. So when we want to construct or think about what it means to have a Baptist political theology, go to the confessions. And yes, it's not totally monolithic. I'll grant that point. It is not monolithic. But does it look like what a Francis Turretin or somebody else might try to construe? No, it does not. There are distinctives. And maybe the argument is saying, you know what, the Baptists were wrong and we should make some revisions. Understood. Make that case. If you want to make that case, you need to be honest about it. So where are we going to start here? One of the greatest valuable resources on the internet that I know of is this wonderful tabular comparison of the Westminster Confession of Faith, the Savoy Declaration, and the Second London Baptist Confession of Faith. If you're not familiar with this, I'm going to link to it because it's just fabulous. It's on James Anderson's website, and it's just delightful. So it's a tabular comparison side by side. I'll put this on the screen here for a minute so you can kind of see some of the things that I'm looking at. I'll scroll through it. The value of this is that you see side by side exactly the wording of each of these confessions. And you'll see if you go to the section on the civil magistrate between these confessions. I mean, the Second London is very, very important. It's probably the most widely used Baptist confession, most widely respected Baptist confession. It ends up getting used in America under the guise of the Philadelphia Confession, and it gets adopted by the Charleston Association. So it's widely influential for a number of years, not just in Britain, but in America prior to the mid-1800s. And you will find, if you look at this, that it's almost identical in three of the articles. There are 4 total articles in Westminster and Savoy. There are 3 in the Second London. The first 2 are very banal sort of treatments. They're very obvious to me. I mean, they all agree that the civil magistrate is God ordained. It's for the public good. It has a purpose. They're supposed to punish evildoers. The state doesn't have like complete authoritative control over everything. It has specific limited power to focus on punishment of evildoers and helping to support the public good. Its goal is to sort of like coordinate large scale efforts that individual institutions at a lower political and more fundamental political level couldn't achieve. So it's not going to displace the role of the family. It's not going to displace the role of the church or these other pre-political institutions in some way. I don't know. The family is definitely like the most foundational unit, so it's not going to overtake the rights and responsibilities that a family has. It's going to assist and aid them as best it can in things that the family couldn't achieve by itself. It's going to protect from enemies and organize militia or armies or different things like that. So that's very standard. Next, you have the reality that it's lawful for Christians to serve and execute the office of the magistrate. All three of these confessions agree that that is totally lawful and it's totally normal. So it's not Anabaptist. You can serve as a member of the civil magistrate. That's appropriate. And then the very final one article here between the three confessions is again almost identical, but not quite. There is a little bit of revision, but for the most part, it's very, very plainly the same idea that we are supposed to pray for and support those who are the civil magistrates because we want to live a peaceful and quiet life. We don't want to have our religion trampled on. We don't want to have these things taken away from us. So we pray and make supplications for them as the Bible tells us to. All very vanilla stuff about the civil magistrate. The interesting stuff comes in Westminster and Savoy. Westminster has an old version, the 1646 version, I think, something like that. Somebody will tell me if I'm wrong. 1644, I don't. 1646 sounds right. We'll go with that. And then they have an American revision of this, where the Savoy has a distinct and very different version as well, where they make some changes and adjustments. And the Second London is completely silent. It removes this section in total and doesn't say anything about it. So the original Westminster is going to give some role to the civil magistrate, not to administer the word and sacrament. That's that, or the keys, the power of the keys of the kingdom. They are very explicit that belongs to the church alone. However, it's going to say the civil magistrate does have power and authority to almost like, I guess, is the word piety. I think they use the word piety somewhere in here, where they're supposed to be protectors of piety or something like that. So they have the authority to take order that unity and peace be preserved in the church, that the truth of God be kept pure and entire, that all blasphemies and heresies be suppressed, all corruptions and abuses in worship and discipline prevented or reformed, and all the ordinances of God duly settled, administered, and observed, for the better effecting whereof he hath power to call synods and blah, 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 blah. So that's all pretty, vanilla, sort of like Christian nationalist stuff. So I try to avoid that terminology, but for this purpose, so when I think of Christian nationalism, it gets abused and hijacked and used in all sorts of dumb ways. I think Christian nationalism sort of like is just traditional, Reformed, Protestant, old school, like this Westminster view of the civil magistrate, where it has a role and responsibility to guard against heresy, to suppress those sort of blasphemies and things like that. And even the American version, it's still, even in the revision, it's going to call the civil magistrate the nursing father, where, it has this role to serve in these particular ways. And the Savoy Declaration is going to do a similar thing, where the magistrate's bound to encourage, promote, and protect the professors and profession of the gospel, and to manage and order civil administrations in a due subservience to the interest of Christ in the world. And it continues on where they do have take care that men of corrupt minds and in conversations do not licentiously publish and divulge blasphemy and errors, yada, yada, yada. So this claim here is to a large degree what a lot of people today want to bring back. They want to bring back blasphemy laws. They want to bring back heresy laws and say the civil magistrate or the Christian prince ought to do these things because that is the God-ordained purpose of the civil magistrate, and that will ultimately produce true and proper religion. You will produce a more healthy, robust society, a God-fearing society. You will get rid of all these heinous and sinful acts and ruinous things that destroy societies if you inject Christianity into every facet of the civil government. The reality, though, for the Baptist view is, in the Second London at least, that it's absent. Now, I wrote a fabulous essay that's, if you've watched this, will have been published in the Hanover Review. I'll drop a link to it in the show notes, by Ian Cleary, who's arguing along the lines of, John Gill argues more along the lines of a traditional Westminster perspective, where the civil government has the right and responsibility to protect and order the first table of the law, not just the second table of the law of the Ten Commandments. And he's going to say, look, Gill says this, and the silence in the Second London gives him license to do that without being out of sync with his confessional tradition. I think that's right. I think the reality is that they knowingly removed this. They knew what it said. They could have said something different. They could have clarified and said, that's not the role of the civil magistrate. They didn't do that. So the Second London itself gives some wiggle room here. It does. It gives you ability to sort of to sketch various differing views of political theology, and that's appropriate. Even the First London Confession does a similar thing. It even promotes and encourages and is thankful for the fact that they have been given the king that they have, and like the version of parliament that they have, and so they're even thankful for the British government format. And so, yes, I think in a British context, you have more confessional latitude when it comes to the nature of the civil magistrate. It's not nearly as clearly cut and dried. However, when you come to the American context, it begins to become a little bit, and quite a bit clearer. You can go to other confessions, such as the New Hampshire Confession, and it's not going to be super tightly argued. And you're going to have, the civil government, divine appointment again for the interests and good of order of human society, and doing the same sort of stuff of summarizing what the Second London Baptist Confession of Faith would say. But then you get to the Baptist Faith and Message of 1925, of 1963, and then of 2000, and it is abundantly clear about the role of the state. You have this article here on religious liberty, and between these differing confessional statements here, they're almost identical. And you're going to have some very serious claims where the state owes to the church protection and full freedom in the pursuit of its spiritual ends. Okay. In providing for such freedom, no ecclesiastical group or denomination should be favored by the state more than others. I mean, that's abundantly clear. The civil government being ordained by God, it is the duty of Christians to render loyal obedience. Yeah. Okay, cool. The church should not resort to the civil power to carry on its work. Got it. The gospel of Christ contemplates spiritual means alone for the pursuit of its ends. Here's the key. The state has no right to impose penalties for religious opinions of any kind. The state has no right to impose taxes for the support of any form of religion. A free church in a free state is the Christian ideal, and this implies the right of a free and unhindered access to God on the part of all men, and the right to form and propagate opinions in the sphere of religion without interference by the civil power. So this is quite pointed and clear as far as a statement goes on the nature of the civil magistrate and civil government. Now, if you look at the Baptist Faith and Message, it also has, on, where is it? The Christian and the Social Order. It's got a really nice portion here where it explains all Christians are under obligation to seek to make the will of Christ supreme in our own lives and in human society. Means and methods used for the improvement of society and the establishment of righteousness among men can be truly and permanently helpful only when they're rooted in the regeneration of the individual by the saving. Okay, yep. In the spirit of Christ, Christians should oppose racism, every form of greed. Yep. We should work to provide for the orphan, the needy. Yep. And where's it go on? Every Christian should seek to bring industry, government, and society as a whole under the sway of principles of righteousness, truth, and brotherly love. So these, it's got two very clear sort of what you might think of as competing claims, but I don't think they are, where there's this principle of, yes, we want to make the government in a large part under the principles of righteousness, and yet the government or the civil magistrate has no right to establish a church. It has no right to charge taxes. It has no right to impose religious opinions of any kind upon anyone. And that is has been called, that portion of the Baptist faith and message has been called non-Christian and non-Baptist. And I think that's just quite ridiculous. And that's just evidence of people telling on themselves that they haven't done their homework and they aren't a confessional people. And that's okay. You don't have to be confessional. I think you should be. But the challenge that comes is when these people resort to deceitful and underhanded tactics and ways. And yeah, that's going to offend some people. But the reality is the reality of being consistent when it comes to confessionalism. And so, for instance, I think the Baptist faith and message is too strict and makes a mistake on communion. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that half the Southern Baptist churches do not practice close communion. I think it should be silent on that matter and should allow a range of practices. I don't make any, claims to hiding from that fact. I just state it clearly, and I think you should change the confession. The problem is when people come in and say you've got to obey every aspect of the confession, but then they themselves deny the confession and find it to be in violation of their own political views on other things. You have to be consistent. You must say the whole thing or nothing, or you must say, I think this should be changed. You can't play, it should be the whole thing. I'm going to disagree with this, and I'm not going to tell you about it. And I'm going to gaslight you for it. That is problematic and seriously an issue. So when it comes to a confession that you disagree with, maybe you come to find out later on that you disagree with it. What do? The first thing you do is saying, maybe I haven't thought this through appropriately, because this is a consensus document that great men and women have labored alongside for. In the case of the Baptist Faith and Message, you have the messengers who are approving this thing. So it is men and women. Sorry to offend you, you super hyper conservative dudes. So the reality is, you have to think, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I haven't thought about this appropriately. Maybe I haven't given it all the sort of appropriate prayer and respect and scripture study as I should. And maybe it comes to the reality of that you didn't understand it appropriately, and you come into submission to it and say, yep, that's the right thing to do. But maybe you really find out you disagree. And depending on what it is, maybe you say, I need to find another tradition to join. Or maybe the reality is that you should lobby for a change in the confession, because confessions are not inerrant. They are errant documents that have errors in them and can continue to change errors. They serve a great purpose, but the reality is that sometimes they get things wrong. And so then you would lobby to say, you know what, we need to change the confession to make it broader. I tend to say I want to broaden certain things. You would have narrower aspects on important things like God, Christ, Spirit, but then you have broader things on things that are less central to the gospel issues. So when you broaden out to the manner of governmental relations, to me that seems like you want to have a little bit broader net to include a wide variety of ideas and thoughts about these sort of things. And so that's what I would recommend when it comes to that. So as far as substantive commitments from a Baptist perspective, you do have some. The civil magistrate is good. It's for the public good. It is, you should pray for them. You're allowed to execute that office. But it does not have any substantive commitments to saying that you must have an established church, or that the role of the civil magistrate is to protect the first table of the law. You don't get that. There is no confessional statement that argues that from a Baptist perspective. Are there some that are silent on this and intentionally silent on it? Yes. So there is some flexibility, but if you are bound to a body that is confessing a document that is quite clear that a free church and a free state is the ideal, you have to deal with that. If you disagree with it, fine, but you need to be honest about it. And so I think as this discussion continues to develop and unfold, just be thinking about these sort of aspects of confessionalism, what it means to be a Baptist, what the role of the civil magistrate is as a Baptist. And I think these are important discussions, and they should be ongoing and should be continued to be had. I think there should be more scholarship and research on the nature of the civil magistrate. It gets all convoluted in America. There's all sorts of confusing things. You have Greg Wills' democratic religion and other stuff. I think there's a ton of fertile material here to think through. You have some people on one end of the spectrum like John Leland. Then you have some others like Isaac Backus, and you have all sorts of other figures. I mean, you have, who is it? James Jones, who writes this sort of pamphlet of the grand case of subjection to the higher powers in matters of religion resolved. You have other resources like Thomas Helway's. I mean, you have all these great voices in Baptist history talking about these things. And so maybe the right avenue is to dedicate your mental acumen and powers to understanding the Baptist story and history and of political thought first. And then from that, you can develop constructive accounts that should be within the confines of Baptist confessional traditions. I think that's the appropriate way forward. And the appropriate way forward is not to develop your political opinions first and then reverse engineer them back into Baptist identity. That's a recipe for disaster, because then you're going to remake all the sources into your own image. You're going to remake Andrew Fuller into a Christian nationalist or whatever it is. You're going to remake whoever it is into your own image. And then any scholar who's actually studied this person or actually studied them and knows all the material on them is going to be just suddenly is going to be a hack because they don't agree with your pre-political commitments. I mean, it's not, I guess that's funny, pre-political commitments anyway, the reality is you shouldn't reverse engineer your stuff. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think you need to first begin with Baptist ideas, Baptist confessional documents. Then you work your way to the Baptist, figures who've been working out these ideas for centuries. Understand them, understand their context, understand their ideas and their thoughts. And then from there, you can begin to do the constructive element of understanding, here are the different models on offer. Here are the different reform models. Here are the different contemporary liberal models. You're going to have all these different things, and they're going to help you understand and to think through what are the different ways that I can handle this. So that's my advice. That's my brief little take on this. Take it or leave it. Let me know what you all think. I appreciate you all tuning in to Kiffin's Keep. This is a lot of fun as always. If I stepped on some toes, let me know. If I didn't push hard enough, you tell me that too. I appreciate everybody who's watching, and I don't mean to be offensive for the sake of being offensive, but I think this is an important topic, and we should be honest and adults about it. And I think it's appropriate to make substantive claims and to do it with clear and forceful language, but to respect those who push back and say, you know what, maybe that's a fair point. I'm trying to somewhat degree straddle the middle, because I think there is gray areas, and I think there's room to develop different models. But in doing that, there are clear confessional Baptistic boundaries of what you can and can't say, especially depending on what Baptistic tradition you're a part of. So hopefully that all makes sense. I appreciate you all for tuning in to Kiffin's Keep, and if you've got other ideas or thoughts, let me know. If you want me to talk more about this, I'm happy to. Either way, I appreciate you all for tuning in to Kiffin's Keep, and I look forward to talking with you all, thinking with you all soon.